as you mentioned, I teach classes at our local community college, and at the end of every session that I teach, I ask my students, I said, what do you want to learn? I want to teach what you want to learn. And the last couple of times they held up the book, The 4 Agreements, like a class of 20 people on Zoom, and 8 of the 20 people held up the book, 4 Agreements. So I developed a course on that, and it was fabulous. And every time I turn around, people are bringing up the idea of the 4 Agreements as a code of conduct that we can use in our lives to find peace and bring kindness and joy to ourselves, and in doing so, touch the people around us. So I thought I'd go ahead and speak about that today because it just keeps coming up. So our 7th guiding principle of spiritualism states that we affirm the moral responsibility of individuals and that we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey or disobey nature's physical and spiritual laws. And in the book I just mentioned by Don Miguel Ruiz, written in, I think, 1989, The 4 Agreements, Toltec shaman Don Miguel Ruiz reveals to us the source of self-limiting beliefs that create unhappiness or unhappiness in our lives by robbing us of joy and causing needless suffering. So the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, number 1. Number 2, don't take things personally. Number 3, don't make assumptions. And number 4, always do your best. These 4 simple yet life-changing insights are like a roadmap leading us away from suffering towards a life full of kindness, peace, and joy for ourselves and those around us. By using these agreements to learn to avoid negative behaviors that create frustration, blame, and hurt, we create our own heaven on earth. And I like roadmaps. There's a lot of wisdom traditions in the world. I find a particular interest Hindu philosophy and Buddhism that gives you these succinct, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And while they may be difficult to accomplish, there's a roadmap there that we can follow. And I find that the 4 Agreements fits right into that category. So first of all, who were the Toltecs? So the Toltecs were known as the people of power for thousands of years, and they lived in Teotihuacan, which is right outside Mexico City, where that giant pyramid is. And they were scientists and artists who practiced ancient spiritual knowledge and teachings. But when the Spanish came and conquered them, they had to conceal their ancestral wisdom due to their forced conversion to Christianity. So who is Don Miguel Ruiz? So he was the youngest of 13, born and raised in rural Mexico, and his mother was a curandera, or a healer, and his grandfather was a Toltec shaman. So they thought he was going to follow in his mother's side of the family's wisdom tradition, but he chose to attend medical college instead and became a surgeon. And then while he was a surgeon, he experienced a near-fatal car crash that completely changed his life. And while he was healing, he apprenticed himself to a Toltec shaman. And therefore, he brings to us a very unique perspective of traditional wisdom from indigenous people and science, which is, I've said many times over, that's my favorite combination of experiences and training that I like when I learn from other people. And he was guided to move to the United States to share modern insights into the Toltec wisdom tradition. So let's take a look at some of Don Miguel's insights into our human condition. So first of all, he speaks about domestication of humans. Now, if you think about it, children are domesticated like we domesticate animals. In order to train a dog, right, we use a system of punishment and reward. And we train our children the same way. When we behave, we're good. And when we don't, we're bad. And because we seek love and acceptance, we learn to behave and conform to society's rules. The domestication process. So in Toltec wisdom traditions, our purpose as humans is to become aware of, and you're going to hear me say mindful and awareness many times in my talk today, because that's really where it starts. So becoming aware of and then transcend the societal conditioning by living in accordance with these 4 simple yet powerful agreements that he's given us in his book. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. So Don Miguel tells us the first agreement may sound simple, but it's the most important and also the most difficult to honor. With just this first agreement, life becomes heaven on earth. So the word, be impeccable with your word. So in the Bible, it says, in the beginning, there was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. So if spirit or consciousness creates matter, our thoughts, our energies, when we speak our thoughts, we're making words, and with our words, we create. So we have to be very mindful of being impeccable with our words, because whatever words we're using, we are creating what we're speaking. And then there's another term that you might not realize where it comes from called abracadabra. I'm sure you've all heard of abracadabra, right? Well, did you know that it was derived from Aramaic abada kadabra, which means I create as I speak. And it's been made into little triangle talismans that in the like 3rd, 4th, 5th century AD in Greece, and also in the Middle Ages, they were put on their doors to ward off evil, to ward off plague. So abracadabra is just not some gibberish term that stage magicians use. It actually has a meaning of I create as I speak in ancient Aramaic. So let's take a look at the meaning of the word impeccability. So impeccable comes from the Latin term peccatus, which means wrong, an error, a failing, or a mistake. Also, it means a sin. We'll get to that word sin in just a minute. The I am part of impeccable means without. So impeccable means without error, without failing, without sin. So let's take a look at the word sin. Sin is actually an old English archery term, a word that means missing the mark, like an archer missing the bullseye. So actually the word sin, when we think about it, means we're missing our mark. It does not mean evil or do evil. So in the Christian religion, they talk a lot about sin in terms of doing evil, like I just mentioned, but sin in terms of its original meaning, means to miss the mark. So when Don Miguel Ruiz says, be impeccable with your word, that means use your word carefully, mindfully, to hit your mark every single time, your mark of being true to yourself. So everything we feel, believe, or say that goes against ourselves is a sin, meaning it misses the mark of being true and accountable to ourselves. So when we're impeccable, we hit the mark by taking responsibility for our actions, by not using our word against ourselves, by judging and blaming. In other words, negative self-talk. Being impeccable also means hitting the mark by not using our word against others in the form of criticizing or gossiping. And being impeccable also means hitting the mark when we only make commitments we intend to keep and honoring those commitments. So I'd like to ask you, without putting a guilt trip on yourself or anything like that, how are you doing in those areas? That's where mindfulness comes in. There's a way we have of being able to step back from ourselves and watch how we're interacting, like a witness, right? So I invite you, next time you're out and about and you start having thoughts, notice how they make you feel. Because if you're feeling negative energy around thoughts you're having or words you're saying, chances are you're not being impeccable. You're missing the mark. And you can stop right there and try again and say it in a way that's positive, or don't go down that road. So did you know that in Tibet, they don't even have a word for guilt? The closest concept they have is intelligent regret that decides to do things differently. So our culture is so focused on guilt and shame that we assume that every country in the world thinks the same way we do, but it's really quite different. So to start applying this agreement of being impeccable with your word in our daily lives, we learn to be mindful of and break the habits of negative self-talk and gossip. Instead, we develop new habits that use the power of our words in a loving and truthful manner. When we are impeccable with our word, we create heaven rather than hell right here on earth. So let's move on to the second agreement. Don't take anything personally. I know someone earlier mentioned that that was something they wanted to dive into and understand a little bit more, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So Don Miguel goes on to say, whatever happens to you, don't take it personally. For example, he says, if I see you on the street and say, hey, you're so stupid, without knowing you, it's not about you. It's about him. It's about the person who's speaking. And if you take it personally, then perhaps you do believe their words, in this case, that you're stupid. And you might go on to think, how did he know? Is he clairvoyant? Can he read my mind? Or can everybody see how stupid I am? So when we take things personally, it tends to mean that we believe what that person said. So let's think about it. Imagine interacting with the same person in two different situations. The first situation, that person had a fantastic day, they got a good night's sleep, had a great meal, and they won the lottery. They're in a really good mood. So how do you think they're going to treat you? Pretty good, right? Same person, different situation. This time the person hardly slept at all, they lost their job, they got in a car accident, and every other frustrating thing that could happen to them happened. They're not in a very good mood at all. So how do you think they're going to treat you if you end up interacting with them? Probably not nearly as well as when they're rested and generally happy with life. The most important thing to note here is that we were exactly the same in both situations. However, I want you to be mindful of this without judging yourself. If we base our opinion of ourselves on how someone treats us, we're in trouble. So that is the deal behind being, don't take things personally. So when we start applying this agreement in our daily lives, we realize that whatever people say or do is their reality, not ours. And as we learn to not be affected by the opinions and actions of others, we begin to avoid suffering caused by taking things personally. So that's agreement number 2. The third agreement, don't make assumptions. Don Miguel points out to us that we have the tendency to make assumptions about everything. It's our human nature. The problem is with making assumptions that we believe it's the truth. We could swear it's real. We make assumptions about what others are doing or thinking. We take it personally, and then we blame them and react by sending emotional poison to them in the form of our word. That is why when we make assumptions, we're asking for problems. We make an assumption, we misunderstand, we take it personally, and we end up creating a whole big drama for nothing. Well, there you go. That about sums it up. So again, let me ask you, are you making any assumptions about someone's thoughts or actions? Just think about it without judging yourself. It's good to notice how we are, to face ourselves. And if you can think of a situation or a person where you're making assumptions, can you see how the drama factor can be reduced dramatically, pun intended, if we just have the courage to say, what's going on? But it's a lot harder to ask than it might seem to be because of our social conditioning. And as Ruiz goes on to tell us, the way to keep yourself from making assumptions is to ask questions, although it can be very difficult at times. Make sure that the communication is clear. And this is where I want to honor our fellow member, Truth Irwin. She embodies this idea of being clear and not making assumptions, up to and including changing her name to Truth. But that's what's going on here, is having the courage to ask when you don't understand. Have the courage to ask questions until you are as clear as you can be. So we apply this agreement in our daily lives by asking questions when we don't understand, rather than ASS-U-ME, right? Ask you me, assume, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. and express what we want and how we feel rather than assuming people can read our minds. We got to be mindful of and learn to notice when we find ourselves making assumptions. If we aren't sure, find the courage to ask questions until we are as clear as we can be. When we communicate with others as clearly as possible, we avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and creating drama. So the fourth agreement and the last agreement is always do your best. This last agreement is the action that allows the other three agreements to become deeply ingrained habits. Ruiz continues, in all circumstances, always do your best, no more, and also no less. Let me change that around. No less, of course, and no more. Think about it. Have you ever tried too hard only to have it blow up in your face, where you think you're doing your best, but you actually did more than that? That's not good for us either. So always do exactly your best. But he reminds us to keep in mind that your best is never going to be the same from one moment to the next, depending on how you're feeling. Sometimes your best will be fantastic, and other times, mediocre. But it's your best. And that takes us off the hook of judging ourselves like we didn't follow our own rule book by not doing our best. So doing our best means taking action because we love it. It's not because we're expecting a reward. Many people do exactly the opposite. They only take action when they expect a reward, such as a paycheck or praise. And then they're not truly enjoying their action because they're expecting something in return, instead of just enjoying the action for what it is. And that's why they don't do their best. So applying this agreement in our daily lives begins by accepting the fact that our best is going to change from moment to moment. Be mindful of and aware that our best will be different when we're feeling healthy as opposed to when we're feeling sick. Like I mentioned earlier, if you've had a really good day, your best is going to be fantastic. And if you've had a bad day, you might take it out on others, but in that particular moment, it was your best. So in all circumstances, if we simply do our best, we avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. So that's the four agreements. Agreements are like a belief system or a code of conduct, and we'll talk a bit more about how our old agreements came into being to begin with. So how do we free ourselves from domestication? Well, according to Don Miguel Ruiz, the first step towards personal freedom is awareness. We need to be aware that we are domesticated, meaning not free. And in order to be free, we need to be aware of what the problem is, not being free, in order to solve the problem. So again, that's where awareness is very important. And in Buddhist practice, they call it mindfulness, just watching without judgment what's going on around us and what's going on inside of us. And as I mentioned, you'll notice that I use those terms a lot. It's just a practice that helps us detach from our actions and judging ourselves. So again, if we have a problem and we're not aware of it, how are we going to solve it? So right now, I invite you to bring some awareness to our quest for personal freedom by taking a moment to take a deep breath, allow your eyes to close down, and bring to mind one or two things you could work on to help you apply these four agreements in your daily life. Just take a moment to see what comes up for you. And when you are ready, open your eyes with whatever came up to you as far as things you could work on to apply the four agreements in your daily life. What came to mind for me was two agreements: don't make assumptions and don't take things personally regarding my mother. So when I was a child, I asked questions because I wanted clarification. She took it personally and assumed that I was criticizing her or challenging her. My mother had a real thing about dominating me and with her authority, and I was a rebel, so it wasn't a good combination. But that actually is a wound that I carry today. I do pretty good about doing my best. don't take things personally. I'm getting better and better at, but making assumptions and not being able to speak my truth is something I work on to this day. And also doing my best, using my word impeccably. I'm doing well with those. It's the don't make assumptions part, because I've been literally beaten down for asking questions. So I just wanted to share what came to mind for me. So let's take a look at breaking the domestication process now that we've defined it. So Don Miguel states, if you want to live a life of joy and fulfillment, you have to find the courage to break those agreements that are fear-based and claim your personal power. So for myself, I have an agreement with myself that I can't speak up because it'll be disapproved of, or even worse, I'll be ridiculed, shamed. So that's an agreement that I've been working on, an old agreement that doesn't serve me anymore. We all have so many deeply held beliefs in our minds that make the idea of breaking old agreements seem impossible. That's why we need to go step by step, be patient with ourselves, and accept that this is going to be a slow process. The way we're living now is a result of decades of domestication. So don't expect to free yourself from domestication in one day. Patience. I've heard it's a virtue. And I don't know about you guys, but I usually want to change to happen like yesterday. But that's not how it works. It took a long time to get into our habit patterns, and it's going to take a while to get out of them. But when we realize that worthwhile things tend to take time, it makes it easier to actively practice patience. How about you guys? How are you doing when it comes to patience and your spiritual growth? I strongly encourage you to just relax, take it step by step, follow whatever roadmap works for you. In this case, I'm suggesting the 4 agreements, and enjoy the process of watching yourself change little by doing the work. So the steps to breaking domestication start with repetition. As Don Miguel reminds us, repetition makes the master when he tells us the old agreements that rule our lives are the result of repeating them over and over again. Therefore, to adopt the 4 agreements, you need to put repetition into action. Practice the new agreements in your life until your best becomes better. So where did these old agreements come from that we all have, and how do we break free? So all of us from an early age, we're domesticated, right? Taught to follow society's rules that are based on suffering, fear, and creating drama rather than peace. We all also have a book of law, a belief system that rules our mind and includes all of society's religions, cultures, and ways that we are supposed to behave. We also all have an inner judge that uses our book of law against us and says we're guilty and need to be punished. And along with that inner judge that we all have, we also have an inner victim who accepts the punishment and then suffers by feeling guilt and shame. We all have literally thousands of agreements that we made unknowingly with ourselves, other people, God, and society in order to please and be accepted. So here are some steps for breaking free of domestication. Awareness, right? I kept saying that. Awareness, mindfulness, that you have fear-based agreements that domesticate you but keep you miserable. We have to find the courage to break fear-based agreements and choose to adopt alternate beliefs, alternate agreements like the four agreements to restore joy and freedom in life. And then little by little, we replace the old agreements with the 4 agreements, and that will restore our personal power and sense of freedom. Once again, repetition makes the master. And as the Greek philosopher Seneca said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And in closing, I encourage you to become mindful and aware of your agreements, your habits without judgment, and practice replacing those unproductive ones with the 4 simple yet life-changing agreements given to us by Don Miguel Ruiz. 1, be impeccable with your word. 2, don't take things personally. 3, don't make assumptions. And 4, always do your best. Let repetition make us masters of our personal freedom by consistently practicing the 4 agreements. and then take joy in the accomplishment of watching our best get better and better. Thank you.